If by 2012 the buffer of IPv4 address will be empty, that means that something has to be done. And you know, a few years ago, the IPv6 debate was more a chicken-egg problem. People were looking after business driver, so where is the application? Why should I go with IPv6? Today we are more in a model I would call a carrot and stick, and probably more the stick apply here. So because of the IPv4 depletion, we have to do something. And then maybe there will be a carrot because there are some applications like sensors application, home networking applications, so there are probably some business driver behind that. But the real motivation of service provider we have seen in the last 12 months is the IPv4 depletion.
Yes, IPv6 tooling. Specifically on today, a very special day, Friday the 13th, a scary time for all of us. And well, as you can see, IPv6 tooling, it turns out to be a scary multi-part film series starring your NOC developers, all of your existing software, all of your existing services, and you. So this is my tale of Friday the 13th, part IPv6. When I started thinking about tools for your NOC, I looked at some of the tools that we run across a series of NOCs, and tools tend to fall into these areas, and in some places they just work, and in some places you've got to do some work to make them work.
Now that's very easy. Basically what it means, you come to us from the RIPE NCC and you pay us money. So I guess this is our marketing slide. So once you've done that, then you need to say, okay, I will advertise my allocation. Fairly similar with IPv4, unless you announce your address space, it's not going to be used for very much. So we ask you, do you want to do that? And you say yes. With one thing, it says as a single prefix. This does not mean you cannot announce it as more specifics, just that you also need to announce the full thing, the full aggregate. This means that people can actually filter because a lot of people are getting tired of the number of prefixes they have with v4, and basically v6 just adds prefixes. So we try and make it easier for people to filter so that we don't really get an explosion of the BGP prefixes.
Where we are in the future? Well, we're working with customers on experiments for things like single-stack IP6, just because it's fun. Things like this NAT PT, which is interesting that it's deprecated, so we're going to have to see what other solutions there are. Obviously, sites with mixes of NAT IP4 and tunneled or native IP6, depending on the CPE. Doing our own router development, the Firebrick router stuff, and this is where the marketing slides would come in if I'd got them. We'll be selling that soon. It'll pad your LTTP packets, amongst other things, but we're making IP6 built into that from the start. So everywhere you could type an IP address, you can type IP4, IP6. There aren't separate commands for IP6. It's just it understands it built in. So hopefully we'll be easier to configure than Cisco's or Juniper's, but we're only a small manufacturer, so we don't really go up against them, but we make good routers. And of course, we're deploying things like Ethernet services to our customers, and thankfully Ethernet just works with IP6, so that's not going to be a problem.
So within the InterNetworks initiative, there's a program on global addressing, which is, I guess, what's most related to IPv6. The focus there is the continued ability for global addressing of the internet. And there's also some work there to understand the shape of the IPv4 free pool run out and develop, support the development of policy in that area. We are at the moment collecting and trying to disseminate credible neutral information about IPv6, IPv6 deployment, and the various transition technologies that arise and then go away and then come back with a different name. And really our role in this space, I think, is to try and foster communications between operators, vendors, users, and so on. So as I say, from an uninvested perspective, we can often provide an environment where conversations can happen that perhaps can't in other fora.
So the next steps for government is that we're preparing a paper internally with some of my colleagues, John, Simon and Stephen, who are here with me today. This is going to help formulate government policy. So it'll go through some kind of internal reviews inside Whitehall and stuff like that. And eventually this will probably cross the desk of a minister at some point. But the general feeling is the IPv6 migration is going to be business-led, or perhaps more appropriately, it will be market-led. So it's going to be something that the government is going to say it's really best up to the market to decide, and the organisations to decide for themselves when they want to do this. As part of when this paper is finally ready, which shouldn't take that long, we're going to seek some input from a range of external bodies just to take some soundings. Do you think we're on the right lines here? Is there anything we've overlooked? Is there anything that could get a change of emphasis? That kind of idea there. And then it will go for some further internal discussion within government and other government departments.
So my afterthoughts, well, deploy IPv6 to your office and NOC LANs with appropriate security, of course. Give your staff a taste of working with it. Some of them will end up supporting it. Many versions of Windows have IPv6 support under Vista or W2K3 Server. In fact, under Vista, it's configured and operational by default. I've said quite brazenly, don't charge customers for IPv6. Make it an additional part of your standard service offerings. I wouldn't buy from an upstream that charged extra for this. At the end of the day, bandwidth is bandwidth. Think carefully before making any service level offerings, if at all, on dedicated IPv6-based services. And finally, people will ask, is IPv6 the right way forward, and scream about the potential fib size. IPv6 is here to stay, quite extensively deployed, and it should be our job to make it both usable and supportable. CRFC 5211.
And my conclusion is that many of the challenges are basically superficial because the underlying architecture and principles have not really changed. Several other people said pretty much the same thing today. And basically it gives us the opportunity to do things differently and improve on it. So for instance, IPv6 addressing plans, ACLs and monitoring.
Base facts. We've seen that in the presentations before. There's not much time left until we run out of v4 addresses, so we're supposed to do something, probably before the auditors come along and figure out that we should have done something. There are a couple of good news. If you are an LIR, and I guess most of you are an LIR, it's easy to request v6 space from RIPE NCC. So go to the LIR portal, request forms, it's just a formality. There are people from RIPE NCC around, and I guess they help you if you're in trouble. There are more good news. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything you know already about BGP4, subnet masks, OSPF, route maps, prefix lists, AS path lists, filter lists, etc., is still valid, more or less. There are a couple of small changes, and so you don't have to learn anything new.